All right, welcome. In this video, we are going to look at some of the ways that we can select features in our data. And so I have in this map, I have a bunch of watersheds across the United States. That's this one here. And then I also have state boundaries, which we'll use in one of our steps. And so what I want to do is show you some of the different ways that you can select, and you might want to select features because maybe you want to trim your data set down to just those that you selected. Maybe you want to perform mathematical operations on just a subset of your data. And we can do that by selecting features. And the select options are up here. So we're going to talk about all three of these. And importantly, this button here is clear selection. So a really important thing, and I'll say this over and over again, is any tool that you go to use is going to operate only on what you have selected if you have something selected. And so if you get a weird result from a tool, a good first thing to try is to just clear selection. And if you aren't intentionally trying to operate on just a selection of what you have, you want to be sure to clear any selected features before you run any tools. So the first thing, note that right now we're in this explore mode, which allows us to move around. And also if we click on something, it identifies it. But if you notice when you click out of it, it's not selected. It doesn't have the blue glow around it, which is what it'll have if we select it. If we want to select things by clicking on them, we click this little select button. And then if you click on one of our watersheds, now it has this blue glow, which means it's selected. If we want to go look at that, so when that's selected, it's also going to highlight it in the attribute table. So if we go to the attribute table, there's a lot of watersheds in here. So it could be tough to find this, but if we click this little button down here, it's going to show just the selected record. So we can see that it's object 397. So if we go back to our table and scroll down to object 397, we will see that it is highlighted, right? So I'm going to try to scroll a little bit more so we can see that that's highlighted and the others aren't. Now, a couple options up here once you're in the attribute table, you can zoom to the selected option. So you'll see it here, you zoom to it, it'll go in close to it. This is really useful if you ran something to select and you don't see anything because maybe it's really tiny, click zoom to and that'll show it so you don't have to search around. Another one is switch. So what switch does is it's going to highlight everything that isn't the one that you have highlighted. So it's going to highlight everything or select everything that's not 397. So we can go switch and now everything but 397 is highlighted, and switch back and it's just that one. And then we can clear the selection by clicking that. So the all important clear button exists here and it also exists up here. So let's go ahead and get out of the attribute table so we can see a little bit more. Just going to zoom out. And then if you're in this select button, as you can see, there's a little drop down. And if you click that, you can also select by a bunch of shapes. So I'm going to click rectangle, and you can see that if I draw a rectangle, everything that intersects the rectangle is going to get selected. And so that's another way to select. So I'm going to clear my selections. It's apparently going to take a second. And then I'm going to talk about how to select by attribute. So this is basically building a query that will select attributes based on values in the attribute table, or select features based on attributes in the attribute table. So we want to select watersheds, and selection type is basically a new selection is going to basically clear out anything that you have selected and just select those things. But if you already had something selected and you wanted to add to them, you could add to the current selection. You could also remove from the current selection. If you have a bunch selected and you're like, well, I want to remove a subset of those, you could do that. Those are the most common ones that we're going to use. You could also select a subset from what you have selected already, and other options, but we don't need to talk about those at the moment. So we have the watersheds. We want to create a new expression, and basically we can filter by any of the attributes in the attribute table. So we have, let's say, mean elevation. Let's say I want all watersheds where mean elevation is greater than 1,000 feet. Okay, so if I hit apply, what we see is this selected only watersheds where the mean elevation is greater than 1,000. So we can subset even further. So we could add another one and say I want mean elevation is greater than 1,000 and annual precipitation is, let's look at the attribute table here and get some idea of what our annual precipitation, oh, it looks like actually they don't have annual precipitation, but we could do latitude. So let's say we only want higher latitude watersheds. So we could say, and I only want watersheds where the latitude is greater than, let's say, 44. And let's go back to the explore. Okay, so we can see that if we do that, we only end up with these watersheds in the northwest of the country, because all of these are lower lying. So we can select using, and you can switch this to and or. There's a lot of different options here. So this is a way that we can select by attributes using numbers in the attribute table. So I'm just going to click OK. It's going to keep all that selected, but I'm going to go ahead and clear those so we can talk about the next option. I'm going to get rid of the attribute table so we can see this a little better. So the final one that I want to show is selecting by location. And so, for example, let's say I just want the watersheds that are in Virginia, but in the attribute table, there isn't an attribute that says state. And so I want to select based on the outline of Virginia. And so what I can do is, there's a number of ways to do this, but I'm going to highlight the states shapefile. I'm going to click select so I can select manually, and then click on Virginia so that I select Virginia. Then I'm going to say I want to select by location. And I want to select watersheds, and I want to select watersheds that are within the states. And notice, so we talked about before that if you perform an operation and you have something selected, it's only going to operate on what you have selected. So I'm selecting states here, but I have Virginia selected. So that means that it's only going to use Virginia that I have selected here. So if I click apply, now it's selected just the watersheds that are in Virginia. So we can zoom in a little bit more and see that it's selected the watersheds in Virginia. So that's a way that you can select by location. So obviously, if you had just a shapefile of Virginia and not the whole 50 states, then you can just not select Virginia and then select by location and choose that shapefile. But because we have all the states, I had to select it highlight it first, select it first, and then we have all those. So let's clear our selection. And those are the different ways that you can select, some of the basic ways that you can select individual items on your map.